In this lecture, we're going to consider pricing. Now, pricing is a very important and a very complicated decision that management has to make. What we're going to look at is not the entire pricing decision, but more the decision based on the information that managerial accounting and reporting can provide. So it's one of the elements that are part of the pricing process. We're going to look at both long-term and short-term pricing decisions. First, let's consider long-term pricing, basically our regular price, meaning our regular price has to meet all costs. In other words, all costs have to be covered in the long run. There are two strategies in our long-term pricing decision, and one strategy is based on cost plus. And in cost plus, we just take whatever the cost is and add a desired profit to it, and that will be our price. The other option is target costing. So in that case, the market determines the price. So we're not really setting the price at all. The market sets the price. What we have to do is back out our desired profit to see if the cost that we're expecting is going to be low enough for us to get the profit that we want. So these two strategies are going to be based on the situation that we find ourselves in. Not really a choice between the two, but what the situation is. Let's look at these in more detail. In cost plus, the total costs are taken, whatever they may be, and we just add the desired profit. Now this works for us because we are the seller and we have power to control the price. The reason we have power is because in these situations there are no substitute products. Target costing is a situation where the buyer, meaning the market, has the power over the price. So there's usually a lot of substitutes out there. Let's look at a couple of examples of pricing. In this situation, we're going to consider the decision to make Star Wars action figures in one of our factories. This is going to cost us in the form of legal fees, and it's also going to cost us in order to have the equipment necessary to make the action figures. We expect to have to invest $10 million in order to make the Star Wars action figures. However, we do expect to sell 2,500,000 units. The cost per figure and variable cost, one example would be like materials would be a variable cost, would be $1.50 per figure. The fixed cost $3,250,000 per year. We want to make a 10% return on the $10 million investment. First of all, what works better for us, cost plus or the target costing situation? Well, this is probably a situation for cost plus. There's no real substitutes for Star Wars action figures. Since there's no substitute for our product, we get to choose the price. We have the power over setting the price. We're a price giver. So with cost plus, we just add up all the costs. So our variable cost would be $2,500,000 at $1.50 each. Fixed cost $3,250,000. So our total cost would be $7 million. Since we want a 10% return, that's $1 million. So our sales revenue needs to be $8 million. If we divide that by the $2,500,000 we expect, then our unit selling price would be $3.20. We can look at this from an alternative perspective. Let's look at it on a per unit basis. When we look at this on a per unit basis, we know that our variable costs are $1.50, so then we just have to take our fixed cost in total, divide them by 2,500,000 units to get a fixed cost of $1.30 each. Our total costs are $2.80. If we wanted $1 million profit, that means that we want 40 cents per unit. We just took the $1 million and divided it by 2,500,000 units. So our selling price needs to be $3.20. These approaches, one is just a total approach and one is just a per unit approach. You get the same result. Both of them take the cost and add a desired profit, and that's what cost plus pricing is all about. In our second situation, we decide we're going to sell Star Battle action figures. We're looking at the situation, and with Star Battle, that's a generic action figure. And because of that, we expect to have competition. And because we're in this competitive market of generic action figures, the most we can get for each action figure is $3. We need to invest $10 million in our factory. We have the same fixed cost and variable costs per action figure. We have a 10% desired profit. In a target costing situation, we're not setting the price. The price is already set for us by the market, $3 each. All we want to know is if the cost is going to be low enough for this to work for us. So if we take the revenue, $3 each, 2,500,000 units, that's 7,500,000, and then compare that to the profit that we want, $1 million in profit. That means the cost needs to be $6,500,000. If we look at the expected cost, though, from earlier, we see that the variable costs are $3,750,000, the fixed cost $3,250,000. So our total costs at this point are $7 million. When we look at this and see that, what we've determined is that our costs are higher than what works for us to sell this product. So what we can do then is, one, we can reduce the amount of profit that we want. Will we be willing to accept less profit? Two, we can try to find some cost-cutting possibilities and cut those costs from $7 million down to this targeted $6,500,000. Or then the third option would be just to reject this and pass on the option. Don't sell these action figures. Look for some other opportunity. We can also look at this from a per unit basis. It's the same result, it's just that we're looking at it from a per unit perspective. So the revenue is $3 because we're going to sell each unit for $3 based on the market price. If we take the desired profit, $1 million, and divide it by the 2,500,000, we get 40 cents. So our target cost would have to be $2.60 per unit. We see that $7 million is our expected cost, and so that gives us $2.08 per unit. There's no difference between these two except that one looks at the total cost and one looks at a per unit amount. Another situation that often occurs is what they call special orders, short-term decision making. In this situation, we've been approached for a one-time offer for a special price. For example, instead of just buying one action figure, maybe they want to buy bulk for their retail outlet. They want to buy thousands of our action figures. Well, in that case, they're not going to pay us our normal price. So we need to come up with a strategy for considering these special orders. So let's say we determined that we're going to do a store battle action figure, and we've got a special offer from a retail outlet that wants to buy from us 20,000 units. Now, they're not going to pay the normal $3 because they're buying 20,000 units. They're willing to pay $1.60 each. So again, the variable costs and fixed costs are the same as before. If we look at this from a knee-jerk reaction, right, and we say, well, the variable costs $3,750,000, the fixed costs are $3,250,000. That gives us a total cost of $7 million. $7 million total divided by 2,500,000 units. That means that each unit costs us $2.80. Should we take a $1.60? Maybe the knee-jerk reaction, our initial impulse is to say no. But that's not what incremental analysis is all about. That's not a short-term or special offer situation. What we need to look at is a comparison between our two alternatives, which is to take this offer or not take this offer. They call that incremental analysis. Incremental analysis is an analysis of a decision based on the differences between the alternatives. When we're doing an incremental analysis, we want to only focus on the relevant cost. Relevant costs are costs that will occur in the future. We're not looking for past costs because we can't change those. We're looking for costs that differ between the alternatives. Relevant costs are only helpful if they differ between our choices. For example, if you're trying to decide between two cars and they're both 4 doors, because that's the same, it doesn't help you decide between the two cars. But if one car gets 30 miles per gallon and then one car gets 35 miles per gallon, that's a difference, and that might help you in making your decision. So we need to keep that in mind. We are looking for differences between the alternatives. So let's go back and look at the Star Battle action figure special offer. So what are our two alternatives? What are our two options? Well, we can either reject the offer or we can accept the offer. If we reject the offer, we'll get revenue of $0. They're not going to pay us because we've rejected their offer. If we accept it, then we're going to get revenue of $32,000. Now, the variable cost will be 0 if we reject it, because that's how variable costs work. They only occur if we manufacture one of our action figures. Take, for example, the plastic in the action figure. If we decide to pass on the offer, we won't use plastic, and the contribution margin then is going to be positively impacted if we accept by $2,000. What about the fixed cost? Well, typically fixed costs are ignored in these decisions. And the reason is because you have to pay $3,250,000 whether you make the action figures or don't make the action figures. However, there may be some fixed costs that will be different. So in this situation, because the buyer is a foreign purchaser, we're going to have to pay some special international shipping. So that extra $1,000 in shipping is a fixed cost, and it is different between the two alternatives. So ignore the normal fixed costs because you pay them whether you reject or accept. So there's no difference. But include the fixed costs that do differ. In this case, the only fixed cost that differs is the shipping. So should we accept this offer? Well, there's two questions that we have to ask ourselves, and they must both be yes in order for it to make sense to accept. We've already asked the first one. Does the offer cover the incremental cost? And it does, because the revenue is going to be higher than the incremental cost, the cost that differ by $1,000. Then we're going to have an extra $1,000 if we accept it. The second question then is there additional capacity in our factory? If we're making 2,500,000 action figures and that's all we can make, that's the maximum capacity, and we're selling them all. So if we're making the maximum capacity and we're selling every one of them, then it doesn't make any sense to take an offer of $1.60 per action figure, because we'd have to take away from our normal sales of 2,500,000. However, if our factory has additional capacity, let's say our factory could make 3 million action figures if we wanted. So both these questions need to be yes. Now, if we want to look at this from a per unit consideration, this approach is really the same thing. It's just looking at a per unit amount. The revenue is $1.60 each, the variable costs are $1.50 each, so that leaves us with an additional 10 cents. Since our fixed costs are $1,000 in extra shipping, we just have to turn that into a per unit amount. So since there's 20,000 units, that's 5 cents each. So our operating income would be affected by each unit by 5 cents. So in this lecture, we considered pricing from both a long-term or regular price perspective and a short-term special offer perspective.